I'm trying to get harder and tougher mentally and physically every day of my life.
You're either the growth mindset or you're the fixed mindset.
If you're trying to be the best, you need to look at who the best is and see what they do.
Relentless pursuit of progress.
There's a difference between the best and the rest.
Welcome to the Brute Strength Podcast.
Champions are built in the mind first.
Where we interview scientists, world champions, doctors, and experts in just about every area of health and fitness.
What do you care enough about? What are you fascinated enough about to go so deep and learn so much that you'll know more about it than anyone else?
And now, here's your host, Michael Cazayoux.
Welcome back. This is Michael Cazayoux, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. Today, I am joined by one of my all-time favorite podcast guests, Dr. John Berardi. John is the co-founder of Precision Nutrition. He and his partner sold that company for nearly $200 million last year. I hope I'm getting that number right. And he is our most downloaded. His first episode was our most downloaded podcast ever. It's called something like Perfecting Your Diet. You can just Google Brute Strength John Berardi, and you can find that episode as well as our second one, which was also amazing. And today we're talking all about his new book called Changemaker. Turn your passion for health and fitness into a powerful purpose and a wildly successful career. He has also started a new company called Changemaker Academy, which is going to be building courses and doing coaching for people in the fitness industry. So in this episode, I think this is for anyone obviously already in the health and fitness industry. You already have a career as a coach, doing nutrition, doing strength and conditioning, anything like that. Or you're someone that really wants to get into it but doesn't know where to start. This is an incredible launching point. So in the beginning, we talk about how to clarify your purpose in your career and why that's so important to do, why so few people actually take the time to do it, and how it can give you a leg up. We talk about what I call his goals skills matrix. He tells me what his actual name is for the show, or is for it on the show, and I've already forgotten, but I call it the goals skills matrix. And basically, it's about figuring out what skills you need to build in order to be successful. So whatever your goal is, you identify what skills you need to build. And then we talk about how he uses, what's the word for it? Like a sports bracket to figure out exactly what order to build each skill in. It's really, really fascinating. I had like a huge aha moment on the podcast on this. So then we talk about some of the most important things in the book he worries people will miss, and so much more. Over the past couple of years, John has become somewhat of a mentor to a D&I. And if you've listened to many of my shows, you know I'm always looking for people to learn from. I'm so proactive about it. And so I've found a lot of great mentors in my life. And I can honestly say that John gives some of the most thoughtful and effective advice of anyone I've ever known. And there's truly no one I respect more in the health and fitness industry than John. So without further ado, please help me welcome Dr. John Berardi. John, thanks for making some time for me today, man.
Oh, no worries, man. Been looking for this conversation for a while, buddy. And as I've told you before, you know, our first interview, the first time you had me on the show, is one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. And I've done quite a few of them. I've even recommended people to come on the podcast because of that interview. So it's always great to connect. And I'm always excited to share some new content with the folks who listen.
Thank you, brother. I'm excited for it. So you've got a new book coming out, and I want to dive into some of the details of that. But before we get into that, as always, I want to talk about family. So as I've talked about with you before, you are one of the wisest people I've ever met. And usually I think a lot of that comes from our upbringing. So what's one of the most important lessons you've learned from your father?
The one that isn't so much an intellectual exercise as it is just like deep in my bones. It's not like I'm gonna put this on your Instagram and get 10,000 people clicking that little heart thingy. But it's just work ethic, man. I come from an immigrant family. Neither of my parents had formal education until they were adults and decided, do some continuing education stuff, which is interesting because it didn't continue anything. There was nothing before that. But they, they came from Italy. They, my dad would, instead of going to school, he used to go to the fields with my grandma, and she used to tell me stories of how she would keep him entertained with, she would tie a rope to his ankle and do a chicken. And that's what he would do all day. He'd just play with this chicken, and help her out in the fields when he got old enough to help. But, hard work is just a thing that you're around when you're around immigrants, who are doing blue collar work, working multiple jobs. So for me, hard work is sort of, just baked right into my DNA now, baked into my bones right now. And this is what I picked up from my parents, from my dad in particular. What I had to do though later was sort of some kind of evolution from that, which was nowadays there is a lot of sort of homage paid to the grind and the hustle, especially in the entrepreneur community. And it doesn't ever resonate with me super well because I grew up around people who are hustling and working really, really hard and not getting any of the rewards that are promised. Like these immigrants are just working 2-3 jobs. They're always working, never resting, and they didn't get the rewards, right? So It's like hard work isn't enough. I mean, it's maybe necessary, but not sufficient. And so, that later in life, I had to realize, how do you temper that sort of, unceasing willingness to give your effort with like intelligent planning and strategy, and all the things that are sort of required for making sure that all that effort is actually worth it in the end.
Right. Is there a moment or like was there a time period in which that really landed for you? Like you were working your ass off and realizing that you were kind of spinning your wheels?
Not necessarily, because it sort of like these were lessons that sort of dawned on me when I first really started putting my energy into projects I was really passionate about. And really, I was really lucky. When I was 19, I was exposed to a bunch of people like, Stephen Covey and Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins and Norman Vincent Peale, like sort of, the first and second waves of what people called like motivational speakers or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, so I got access to some of these ideas and they resonated so much because I, again, was steeped in this environment of hard work with no return. So it was like, I have to start thinking about how to produce some kind of desired outcome based on this effort. And, it's really coalesced in a philosophy for me, which is, whatever you call your purpose. And the way that I think of it is I frame up when I do these exercises with people, when I die or retire, ... So when I die or retire, I'd like to know that X, and then you start planning towards that. Your life becomes a tribute to that, that's your purpose. And so, I was fortunately able to start generating that reasonably early in my career. And it's part of what the book's about now. Mm-hmm. Like how do we help people get pointed in the right direction? So if you're going to spend your whole career working hard, you might as well, get the outcomes that you want for that work. Right.
So in your book, in the, I forget what they call this section, I guess like not the acknowledgement, but you're like thanking your family or giving a message to your family. I forget what they call that. It says dedication. Thank you. To my wife and children for helping me live my purpose, using my unique abilities in harmony with our shared values. The thing that really jumped out at me in this was the piece about shared values, because I know you are so intentional in every area of your life. So I kind of assumed you might have a formal process where you and your wife and your family come up with shared values. Does that exist?
Yeah, I mean, and probably the backstory would be of some help here. There was a point years ago. I don't even know if I've ever shared this with you, man, but there was a point years ago where we were running Precision Nutrition, Phil and I. For those listening who don't know, that's the company that I was involved in for many years that sort of had done very well in the health and fitness industry. And there was a point where I was just stopped having fun, man. We started this thing because it was our passion. We were having a blast, and then it was growing and growing and growing. And I was getting miserable. I was miserable all the time. I wasn't able to do any of the things I used to love doing. I loved creating content. I loved marketing. I loved science and research. And I was finding that weeks would go by and I'd done none of those things. I was just in meetings and whatever, the things that I liked the least, management. And I realized in retrospect, I had bought into what I thought the world was telling me I had to be, which was this model in my mind. It was like, founders start a company, and then in the beginning they do everything, right? And then as the company grows, you have to float on top of the company. So when you hire new people, you have to become a manager. And then when you hire managers of your team, then you have to become a leader, a C something O or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to live this out. And so I wasn't having any fun, but then I was doubling down on it. I'm reading stuff and getting coaching and taking courses. I'm this is what I have to become now. And, it got to the point I have these booklets all over my office, these little, they're called marble notebooks. They're the notebooks that are black and white covers, that look marbled. And I just write down stuff all day long, some stuff about family, some stuff about the experiments I'm doing, some stuff about work. And I still have this page from back then where I was just, we had just had our third child. So I suspect the combination of sleep deprivation and feeling out of my depth at home had something to do with this. But it was also months and months and months of having no fun at work, where I just wrote how to get out of this. Right.
Wow.
And at the top was, sell my shares of Precision Nutrition, and then had options below that, and then give my shares to Phil, the co-founder, just give them to him and walk away, which, in retrospect, I would have lost about $100 million if I would have done that. So thankful I didn't. But at the end of the list was just kill myself, drive off a bridge so that the family at least get some insurance money, And people know me, I'm a pretty systematic thinker, so it's not unreasonable to think that I would make a list of all the possible options,
right?
But it was pretty sobering, man, looking at this in ink, in my notebook, as an option, for my life at the time. And so I ended up calling up Phil and sort of shared the struggles I was having, and he drove out to my place. He lived in Toronto at the time, and I lived about 2 hours outside the city. And we spent the day together, and we really just unpacked this. And, he had enough distance to be able to help. And for him, he was just dude, we can hire leadership, see something O's you can find, what you do, what's special about what you do, we can't. So we need to really double down on that, and not just do what you think you ought to be doing. We need to go through a process. And that's where this sort of purpose, unique abilities, and values set of exercises came from. I was kind of the first person at Precision Nutrition to do it. And then we ended up doing it with our entire team. And it's become a really important part of my life process now, which is all around this idea of first clearly identifying your purpose. Most people are way too vague. They say things in health and fitness, I want to help people. It's too vague. It's non-helpful of a purpose, Right. You can help people by being a paramedic, by working in a shelter, by serving coffee at a Starbucks, People need that morning coffee, right? So how do we get really, really specific on what that is? So that's where we began, purpose. Next was unique abilities. What are the things that I have potential to be or already am world class at? What among those do I love doing? Like I could do for the rest of my life and only want to keep getting better at. Mm-hmm. And then moves the needle, right? Among those things, what can actually help with my goals, whether it's financial goals or whether it's reach or connection or whatever I define. And then the last was values, and the one you asked about. Once we have, purpose, a set of unique abilities, like this is, my tools that are uniquely me that I'm going to use towards my purpose. Now it's using your values as guardrails. And I really do think of them as guardrails, not only to keep you away from things you ought not to be doing, like immoral or illegal things, know, but sometimes when you're really in your stride with your purpose and your unique abilities, you can work too much, and the other things in your life, like self-care, like time with family and loved ones, commitment to development as a parent or partner or whatever, go by the wayside because you're so passionate about your work. So that's where the values come in. Can we articulate and define values, which are, I think they're the ideals that you consider would make for a good life, and then use them as your guardrails. And then again, same as the other two exercises, it's super easy to be like, my values are X. So you're sitting in your office or wherever you like to think with a pen and paper, and you're just going to write down your values. Mm-hmm. But I find it so easy to devolve into cliches. I feel like in the exercises I teach, purpose, unique abilities, and values come from sort of like triangulation between yourself and the people around you, right? So your family, your friends, your colleagues, the people who know you.
Can you
best.
Define triangulation?
Yeah, I mean, Ray Dalio's used it popularly in the last few years, mm-hmm. but it's a term that's been around forever. And the idea is just, can I get the perspectives and feedback from a diverse group of other people, and then try and find the truth, or, in engineering, it would be like the point you're trying to find by like circumnavigating it. You're using this perspective and this perspective and this perspective, and it's impossible to land right on the truth, but you can get closer and closer mm-hmm. to it from all these different perspectives. So unique abilities, you're probably the worst person to define them. However, if you ask 10 friends a series of questions, and colleagues and family members, you can figure out your unique abilities pretty quick. And same with values. We do this alone and with others to come up with this idea of values. And then what we do is reality test them, right? So let's say we play these little games with them. So let's say you have adventurousness and career orientation as two of your top 5 values, right? So then you pit them against each other and you say, all right, cool. So imagine it's February and you were just offered a job that starts in June that feels like it's going to put you right on track to your ultimate career destination, right? So you're like, I'm super career oriented. This is great. But it turns out you've also been planning for the last 3 months this amazing trip to Europe in June, July, and August. And you have to pick, right? What do? This helps us rank stack your values and identifies whether, okay, is adventurousness really your top value if you take the job instead? You know what I mean?
Right.
Or is career really your top if you go on the trip instead? So it's just, again, sort of getting closer and closer to the truth, devoid of cliches. And not just because it's a nice, fun philosophical exercise, which it actually is, by the way. When you do this with friends and family, people end up telling you all these wonderful things about yourself, and it feels really, really good, right? But independent of that, it actually helps you make every single decision that you need to make moving forward.
Right.
You know what I mean? So for me, I have these things actually posted visibly in my office and have for years. And they just remind me every single day, because I sometimes forget. My thinking gets cloudy and muddled, and opportunities come in and I'm not quite sure where they fit because I haven't had opportunities like that before. And I'm like, what do I do? Then I can just look at my purpose, unique abilities and values and go, oh, that's right. I already decided what to do about this, even though and so that's, and so that works well for your career, but it also should work with your family life. If that's a value of yours, we can put on the table the notion that you might be part of a family and it's not of value to you, then maybe you don't have to do this exercise with them. But if it is, then they should be part of it, right?
Yeah, and it can be really uncomfortable, especially when you first start writing some of these things down and playing with these things, because what I've found, and I think a lot of people find, is they say they value something, but they really don't. Like if you look at their calendar and their checkbook, they really don't value those things. Yeah. And it can be really uncomfortable, but we want to know this shit because we want to know how to have the biggest impact, have the most amount of happiness, have the most amount of alignment with who we really are. So I love that you have such a detailed process for how to do all of these things, rather than, what usually happens is people read like a New Year's resolution blog post, and they might have like a question or like an exercise, but you have an entire process for all of this.
Yeah, it takes a little while, but I love your example there of like the calendar not matching up and, all this stuff, because it's the goal is not to come up with a set of purposes, unique abilities, and values that you think you should want. Right. The goal is to come up with the ones that reflect you truly and to the core, at least at this point in your life. And that is so awesome, because it then can not only help you decide what to do with your calendar, but it can help you decide how you use time and your life and your skills. I think back to the last conversation we had, which wasn't recorded for the podcast, but you and I were just chatting, and you were asking me about content creation. You remember? Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this idea, like how might a company create like a content machine like Precision Nutrition created? And for those who don't know, Precision Nutrition gets like 3 million visitors to the site a month, and I think has best in industry articles and infographics and animated video. And you were like, if one wanted to create that, like how'd they go about doing it? And my first thought was, I could teach that to someone. Except if the horses aren't already riding in that direction, it would be problematic. So in other words, if no one at that company is already thinking deeply about content in this way, is already doing it this way, then they'll never be able to match it. They'll never be able to match what Precision Nutrition does, largely because, and again, you'll be able to tell in a minute, I've been thinking about this a lot since we had that conversation. I was like, what Mike didn't know was that, okay, the predominant magazine for people who are into like strength training back when I was young in my early 20s was called Muscle Media 2000. And it was where the serious lifters went to learn, It was bodybuilding, it was strength training. I was writing articles. Now, I wasn't submitting them. I was young. No one would have accepted them. I was writing articles for that magazine, like in my bedroom of my parents' house before I moved out. Like, in other words, I was writing long form content. Wow. Before anyone ever gave me an inkling that they would pay me for it. You know what I mean? So, I mean, this is, again, getting the idea of getting closer to who you are. And then just amplifying that, So the idea being, how do I create a content machine like PN? Well, there's a path to that, but is anyone in your environment passionate, just already doing this for no pay? If not, we got to look at the things they're already doing for no pay, and figuring out how to do them at the same level that PN does, let's say, long form written content. And that's how we figure out how to make a win for people. There's just in health and fitness right now, there's just so much copying. We see people do something well, and then we go try and copy it, and I just think and you've heard this before, like the world doesn't need more of that, just copies of the same thing over and over again. It needs the uniqueness that each individual can bring. So that's really the point of these exercises. It's to really identify what's special about you and then figure out how to amplify that and then make that world class, rather than do what I was doing at the time, which is trying to copy something else. To be a great entrepreneur, you have to be a great leader and a CEO or chief science officer or whatever. So I was trying to copy that, and I was miserable. I wrote down, kill myself as an option. You know what I mean? So stop copying, right? Find out who you really are. And so that's a really, really important part of my process. And obviously you can tell I'm getting animated. So it's a deep belief of mine.
This is fucking gold, man. Yeah, this is really resonating with me. The after that conversation, you helped me realize that one thing that we're already doing that I could do for days and days and years without pay is exactly what we're doing right now, just having deep conversations. And we took that information and now we're working on doing more podcasts. We're spending so much less money on YouTube and on writing, and we're just going deeper into what we love to do. And one of I had a conversation about this the last few days. I think a couple good measures of if you're in the right thing, like if you're doing the right thing, is if it feels natural and if it feels effortless. I think those are two really good metrics.
They really are, and then I just think about, okay, great. Well, then how do we balance that with the other advice we hear all the time, which is in order to grow, you have to be out of your comfort zone, right? So you're like, all right, how do I square these two things up in my mind? That if I'm doing great work, it's in that beautiful zone of flow, the effortless, natural, this is the expression of me. And then this other story we keep hearing about, you have to step out of your comfort zone. And this is still an open question for me. I haven't resolved it. Although what I will say is everyone who knows me knows I hate cliches, and fetishes, things said over and over again that seem really soundbitey and maybe somehow hit you in the feels, can often be really things that could take you off track. So for example, that idea of being out of your comfort zone, it seems to be the popular thing nowadays. Right. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing, And I'm like, that statement's missing a whole lot of context. You know what I mean? Like the other day, my son and I were playing soccer out in the front yard, and he kicked the ball and it just rose up and hit me right in the nuts, It was really uncomfortable, but I don't think I was growing. Yeah. So, and that's a silly example, but it really is contextual. You know what I mean? How do these things fit? And I tend to agree with you, when it comes to work, I think we have to go through a process to figure out who we are and what's unique. And it's not just work too. We see it in athletics and the gym as well, right? Like, people have different body types. They just do. Spend enough time in the gyms and you see it, right? And so it makes me sad when you see people who are just born to do strength training, for example, decide they're going to be ultra marathoners. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, there's a whole lifetime ahead of you of pain and suffering and non-enjoyment when you could just be lifting heavy stuff. And vice versa. You see some people who should be totally going towards a different sport that would be right up their alley, and then they choose this other thing because it's hard or it's a challenging goal or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe the best I can say is it's not for me. For me is deeply figuring out who I am, at least the who I am today version, and then leaning into that, and then just making that world class. Like, how can I be as good as the great people are at what they do, at the thing that's unique to me, and whether that's training or sport or a family or business, because I think about the family stuff too. We have 4 children, as you know, and you spent time with us. Amanda, my partner, my wife, has a whole bunch of skills that I don't have. And if I try and be Amanda in the partnership, I'm just a really bad version of her, you know?
You don't look very good at breastfeeding, John.
Hey, I appreciate that. It's actually it's always a funny thing at our house because our 3-year-old now is still breastfeeding. And so like whenever, and she just like, you know, she's alive and she's verbal and can do all these fun things. So we're like, yeah, maybe it's time to start winding this down, honey.
Right.
And so then, but still, she has those moments where she's just clinging to Amanda and wanting her milky.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always like, no, come to me. I'll give you some milky, honey. And she's like, no, daddy's milky's no good. So, you know, it's just what am I good at in my way? And then how do I be that with the kids? You know?
Yeah, I love it, man. So I want to go a little bit deeper into this. Sometimes in the past when I have done some of this type of work, like writing about purpose and values and long-term vision, if I do it in a way, like sometimes I treat it almost like a homework assignment and I'm doing it like in the middle of a work day or something like that. And what I've found over time is that the more space I can give myself, at least to a certain extent, the more I'm actually going to tune in to what really matters to me. Otherwise, I feel like I might just be like that. The voice of society and my conditioning might be a little overactive, and I might not actually get down to the truth. Do you have any advice for people on like the best time or any strategies on how to get the most out of these exercises?
I do, yes. I call it thinking day. So, you know, for a really long time, I would block aside the first half of Fridays. And that would be, I would just put it on the calendar, like 9 through noon, thinking day. And that was the space that you're talking about, right? Now, that would manifest in all kinds of ways. I wasn't just like sitting in lotus pose, you know, we're hoping for ideas to come, you know. Some days I was actually thinking about a real problem and I needed input. So during that 9 to 12, I would be interviewing people to help me solve this problem I was thinking about. Other days it would be earmarked for things like this, where I was doing, you know, exercises. You know, other days it was actually just sort of independently wrestling with the thing. And other days is learning, right? Where I'm like, okay, I'm thinking about something very specific and I want to read a book about it or a website about it or watch a video about it. But I think that life comes at us pretty quick sometimes, and it's really, really hard in the moment to be our most lucid thinking selves when stuff's flying at us. So, I mean, there's a big, I don't know, I think in our culture today, there's a lot of conversation about coaching, right? So, think about athletes. The best athletes have the most coaches. So shouldn't you get coaching too? And it's often coaches who are selling coaching who are like extending this narrative, you know? I'm like, wouldn't it be interesting if we could find a way to coach ourselves? So like clear thinking day, Friday, note taking, you know, Mike or JB coaches frazzled, confused brained Monday, JB. You know what I mean? And I think this is, again, this isn't me saying don't get coaching, because I do think coaching is super valuable. But I also think we have to take some responsibility for coaching ourselves. And clear thinking self has to capture those clear thoughts and remind, you know, frazzled brain self about what they decided.
Right.
You know, and that's what I think these exercises are so valuable for. Like you say, if they're crammed into the middle of a day, then it's not clear thinking brain that's doing the answering, you know? So where is that space? Where are you going to take it? For me, it was half a day every Friday where I would do this. And that was my day for my best self to show up, to take some notes, to write some things down. I would often post what I came up with on those Fridays, like underneath my computer monitor, like somewhere where I would just see it every day when I was working, to remind me when I was getting frazzled what I decided in a moment of clarity. So I think and again, this isn't just work related. It has to do with every set of goals or every kind of achievement you want to make or every outcome that you want in your life. Clear thinking self is going to do it better. So how do you A, set aside time to do clear thinking self, and then B, have clear thinking self available when you're not clear thinking self through notes to yourself or reminders or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. So once you've clarified your purpose, you give, and we may have talked about it on a podcast before, but if so, I'd love you to reiterate. You have I call it the goals skills matrix. I don't know what you call it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Can you explain that for people who haven't heard it before?
Yeah. Goals, skills, practices. Yeah. So I like to unpack things into their component parts. A good example of something not unpacked is mindfulness. Right? So people nowadays are like, you need a mindfulness practice. You need to be more mindful. And I often think about that and I'm like, it's true. Mindfulness helps. But if I don't have the skill yet, how the hell am I going to do it?
Mm-hmm.
All you're doing is finger wagging. You're saying, be more of what you're not. And that doesn't help me at all, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. This is the equivalent of saying, be stronger to someone who's not very strong in the gym.
Right,
you know
right.
what I mean? Oh, you know what you need to do to be successful at the gym? Be stronger.
Right.
Like, thanks, man.
Or be more confident.
That's right. It would be really helpful if you unpack that for me. So it's like something I could practice. So, we started this with respect to nutrition at PN, and then I sort of carried it out into all aspects of my life. But the idea was, how do you take what is a goal? It's fundamentally something out of your control, and unpack it into a series of skills that are necessary to achieve the goal, because it's the only path. You need to build the skill that the person who has what you want, already has, right? Without the skill, you don't get it. But you don't build skills without practices, daily practices. So I just make a flow chart where you write the goal at the top. Underneath, you write the skills that would be required to achieve that goal. And then underneath each of those skills, you write down the daily practices that you might follow for a week or 2 weeks or however long you think will be necessary to build that skill. And then over time, you do these practices and then you build up the skills and they stack on top of one another. And then you eventually get the goal. And people are always like, that's so cool. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think it's special. Like, it's how you learn to play the piano mm-hmm. or any instrument. It's how you learn to speak another language. You have to do some stuff every day. And that stuff retrains your nervous system, retrains your thinking apparatus, retrains your daily practices, your habits. Until you just eventually get the goal. Like, thinking about the goal all the time is worthless. Doing stuff toward the goal all the time and doing stuff in a strategic way that one practice builds on the next, one skill builds on the next, is the only reliable, high probability way to do it.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about how to decide which skill to build first and like how to stick to things. Mm-hmm. Maybe we could use your example of, or your experience in change psychology. So one of the hallmarks of precision nutrition is something like the best diet in the world is the one that you actually stick to. And you and your team have spent a lot of your career, a lot of the business's existence in figuring out how to actually help people stick to health and fitness programs. Mm-hmm. So could you use that as an example to show us kind of your process for how you decided what to work, or if even you decided to work on something first, and any more of the process that you can share with us?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's two ways to think about this. One is like, what will I need to become future me, as a person or as a business or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then the second is, but I'm going to need a lot of things. How do I decide which one to do first? Mm-hmm. So the first part, what do I need to be future me? I think about in terms of like what's often been called the T-shaped curriculum. So the T-shaped curriculum idea is that if you draw a big T, right? So a horizontal line with a vertical line straight through the middle of it. And along that horizontal part of the T, you think about all the skills that you'll need. You don't need to be a deep expert in them, but you'll need to know enough to converse about them and apply them in your life to be future you, right? That person who has the goal. And then down the vertical bar, right, the one going straight down, is the area where you develop deep expertise, right? So at the beginning of your career, at any stage in your career, you can do this. You can sit down, draw an empty T, and fill out the things that you'll need to be successful future you. And I don't know, let's just say my career. Like I have a PhD in exercise and nutritional biochemistry. So the vertical part of that T is my deep expertise in science and nutrition and biochemistry and supplementation and all that, right? But to become who I am today, I also needed to learn some business skills, learn some communication skills, learn about change psychology, what you mentioned, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff I needed to do, skills I needed to build to be able to do the things I've accomplished in my career, right? So when I coach people, it's like, well, what do I need to do next? I'm like, oh, the very next thing you have to do is figure out who you want to be. So unique ability, purpose, values. And then we start filling out, what that person who you ultimately want to become will have been trained in. What kind of stuff will you have learned? What kind of mentors have you had? And we fill that T out. And again, you can post that publicly. You can post it in your office. You look at it every day. And it has a couple of, again, really great benefits, not just so you can see who you are or what you want to be, but so that it helps you decide everything you need to decide going forward. Hey, there's a great continuing education course coming up in my town. It's got my favorite coach is teaching it. Should I go to it or not? Should I spend the $1,000 on it? You look at your T and you go, oh, wait, that's not the thing I need most right now. It's not even on my T. Damn it.
Right.
Can't do it. Right. I'm going to invest in the building out of the T that's going to make future me the person I want to become. And then, okay, now you have this T and you're like, wow, I got a lot of gaps. Right. How do I decide what to do next? And then there I use just like an NCAA tournament bracket where you write down, you basically, in the book, I just have these as printouts, but you can write it down on a blank piece of paper. You make a bunch of boxes down the left-hand margin of the page. Box 1 competes with box 2, box 3 competes with box 4, and then you get your semifinalists, and then you get your quarterfinalists, and then you get your finalists. And, you just have things compete, right? So you're like, oh man, I need to develop this, and this. I also, or whether it's in business, should I do marketing, Facebook ad, or social media, paid advertising? Should we do articles? Whatever, right? And you just pit them against each other, and there has to be a winner in every bracket, right? And at the very end, you get a single winner. This is your tournament winner. This is what you do next. And once you do this enough, the anxiety of seeing everything not in that final box, you'll get better at dealing with, because you can't do more than one thing at a time. Not well anyway. Right? So how do you do that one thing like relentlessly well? And then once you've done it, then you go back and you run another tournament. What's the next thing in line? And so, again, like folks don't have to do it this way, but it's the only way I've seen reliably to increase the probability that you're making good decisions. The alternative, just sitting there with a bunch of things in your head and a bunch of anxiety about what to do next, and then essentially picking at random, because that's what happens when you're emotional about it and not clear thinking. You kind of pick at random. Maybe you get it right sometimes, maybe you don't other times. That doesn't feel like a good approach, right?
Right.
So how do we have method? And so that's kind of how I think about it, right? So how do you build out future you? It's through this idea of the T. And then how do you figure out what to do next on the T? Well, you run some tournaments.
Oh man, this is super powerful and helpful for me specifically. So I find myself, and I'm sure people can relate to this, I find myself in business, having the 10 different things that I'm working on: content creation, marketing, leadership, management, like all of these different skills that I know that some of them I probably don't need to develop, but I'm kind of like falling victim to what you were talking about earlier, thinking I have to. But some of them I really I love, and I want to build these skills. And I find myself sort of just doing them all at the same time. And part of it is fun, but then, I know how skill development works, and I know how focus works. And I feel like I'm not using my time and attention most efficiently. So I'm wondering your thoughts on that, and if there's what you think the value in focusing on one skill at a time or two skills at a time is.
Yeah, I mean, what you're presenting here is not something that ever goes away. It's never gone away for me. I've just gotten comfortable with the idea that there are always loads of things that I feel like I quote unquote should be doing. But I've also learned that if I lean into that and just keep feeling that and keep trying to do them all, I don't do great work. None of my goals are achieved, and I feel terrible all the time. That's not good.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I get absolutely zero of what I want under those conditions. No fun, no goals, and nothing to show for having felt all that anxiety. So we just have to accept the fundamental reality of how these things work. And to be honest, man, very few people that I've met have, even at the highest level of business, let's say, for those who don't know, back in 2017, Phil and I ended up selling the majority share, our majority shares of Precision Nutrition. We were 50-50 owners, and we ended up selling most of our ownership, and we still have a small percent ownership in the company, but we're not involved operationally. And even up till that point, I mean, we ended up selling the company for close to $200 million. So it wasn't a small company. We still only had 3 priorities as an organization every year. We had 120 people working there. Only 3 things. And I'll tell you, most people, way more than not, thought we were crazy. They thought we were like country rubes who didn't know what we were doing, and we just got lucky, you know? And I'm like, I don't know, 2 years hence, I've gotten more experience. I've started a bunch of other new projects and things like that. I just believe this even more than I did back then.
Right.
Taking on all the things doesn't lead to what you want. It just doesn't. I don't see it consistently leading to what people want. What I see consistently leading to it is getting ruthless, like really shrinking it down. It's not just one thing. Like if you're in an organization, you've got plenty of people, right? So, and I think that's where this myth gets propagated. You're like, oh, we got lots of people, so shouldn't we be able to do more priorities? But the answer still comes down to, if it's a big, important project, important enough to do, like to make it one of your company's priorities, then some of your senior leadership team have to be involved. How much can they be involved in? 10 things? No, I've seen it. Definitively not.
When you say things, are you talking about your 3 products? Yeah,
or projects, really. I mean, okay.
So 3 projects moving at a time.
Okay, yeah, 3, and of course they're going to have subtasks and stuff like that, right?
Sure.
But just 3 central focal points, right? And that stems from what we're trying to do this year. If it's grow the business, let's say, then, you need awareness, and sales. So you're like, okay, cool. If the business is going to grow, then at least 2 out of our 3 things have to be sales, marketing, awareness, right? Are they? Are those 2 of your 3 things? And if you have 10 things, you're probably only going to do 2 or 3 of them well anyway. So why not just have 3 of them and just everyone push on those same boulders? You know what I mean? If it's big enough, if it's worth doing enough, if it's important enough, you're going to need everyone pushing on it, right?
Right.
So I don't want 2 people pushing something they can't push. So anyway, I mean, your question was, you feel this. Every company feels it. I still feel it some days. And I was reading something from Charlie Munger recently talking about this. I mean, the great business thinkers of all time all talk about this. You know, when are you carving out time to think about prioritizing, right? And then you sit there and you write down all the things and you kiss some of them goodbye, or tell them, hey, maybe in the future we're going to visit, but these 2 or 3 things are the things. These are going to make the biggest difference. Now, the one thing I've learned is that sometimes you're not sure what's going to make the biggest difference, right? And that becomes a tricky place because you're like, I have to decide and make prioritizations here and say yes to only 2 things. And I don't know if they're going to matter, And this is why I think some people take on more things than 2 or 3 because they're not sure. So it's like they're hedging their bets.
Yes. Dude, this is amazing. This is great. I love it.
I don't know. So I'm going to do all 6. I'm like, I know, but what's terrible about that? If none of them work, you won't know if it's because they were never going to work or because you didn't give them the attention they deserved, right? So now you develop a bunch of superstitions. Oh, that project, we tried that didn't work. But wait, you only had 2 of your team on it. None of the senior team was on it. You gave it 2 months. You were thinking about 8 other things at the same time. Gosh, I can't think of a better recipe for something not working.
Right.
You know what I mean? So how do you then not hedge and decide? Well, that's when you need other brains, outside of your area of expertise. You got to hire some people to come in, not just one, a couple. And as we talked about earlier, triangulate. A beautiful set of lessons from Ray Dalio's book is the idea that triangulation is best when, let's say, you get 3 people to weigh in on a challenge that you're facing or decision, or like, what do you think will really matter here? And then hopefully at least 2 of them disagree. And that's when triangulation gold happens, right? Because then I can say, person 1, hey, listen, I talked to 3 different people about this and everyone was so valuable. But person 2 kind of disagreed with you on this point. And obviously I'm trying to learn and I'm new to this. I want to understand why do you think they disagreed with you? And it seems like you would disagree with them. Can you help unpack that for me? And then you go to person 2 and you say the same thing to them. And then the conversation that comes out of that deepens your understanding so much. The simple example I often give is, Phil ended up buying this building in Toronto. And it's kind of like a shared gathering and workplace. And, PN has always been virtual, but there's a bunch of people from PN who live in Toronto. So he's like, I want a cool building where I can have fun gatherings and host events and also have our team come and work here whenever they want. And so he wanted to put in like a world-class coffee bar, right? And so he ended up doing this. He interviewed 3 people, like a world champion barista.
Wow.
This one particular coffee machine manufacturer, the guy who developed the technology and has the patent. And he talked to these 3 people and he got their feedback. And then he just ended up being like, 1 and 2 didn't agree. So then he went to 1 and he's like, hey, this guy over here said this. And he's like, I actually know that guy. I really like him. I respect him a lot. But what you have to understand about him is that he really prefers automation. Like he wants a world-class cup of coffee to be made no matter where you are in the world, no matter what the water quality is, no matter what altitude you're at. These things affect your coffee quality. And he wants that all smoothed out by the machine. And he's like, for me, I like character, right? So I want a great cup of coffee, but I want the local character to be infused in the coffee. So it's just got to taste great. But if the water tastes different or the altitude changes it, it's okay. And so Phil's sitting here going, oh, great. Neither one is right or wrong now. I have to choose what I want more. Do I like automation more or craft? And then that's how I decide. And that's how triangulation works so well. So back to your original point, how do I decide among all these things that I think are necessary? Well, one is you have to get like emotionally comfortable with seeing 10 important things and only choosing 2 or 3. And then You have to, and the 2 or 3 that you choose have to be ones that have a high probability of success. And if you're not sure which ones they are, don't hedge your bets and go back to 10. Go talk to people who have good instincts and great experience to figure out if you can hedge your bets that way. You know what I mean? Rather than hedge with more volume, hedge with more confidence into the few things. And it's all easier said than done. But we're not talking about this so we can be average, right? We're talking about it so we can excel. Right. And this is what the people who excel do.
Oh, man, that's so powerful. It jumps out at me that it doesn't even matter if you pick the absolute 2 best things, right? You're gonna use your thinking time and triangulation to try to get at the truth. But the worst possible thing you could do is not choose and try to do everything.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the default. You're right. That's what most people do. They just don't choose, right? And for a long time I was like, why? Why are people doing this? And I'm like, oh, I get it. They don't have any confidence. They don't know what's going to work. And for me, like at least in my work at Precision Nutrition, I've been doing this since I was 16 years old, man. I have really good instincts for this stuff. I'm not right 100% of the time, but you put me in a room with a group of other people and my instincts are going to be right more of the time because I have all of this history and experience, right? So that makes it easier for me to choose. And so for the longest time, I used to be very judgmental about this process. I'm like, why are these idiots not just choosing? What's wrong with them? Why do they think I'm the idiot? Right? And I'm like, oh, in the absence of what I've got, loads and loads of experience, I've run 1 million tests, and lots of years, they don't have any way of knowing which one's going to work.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we need to give them an apparatus to do that.
So damn good, man. So you've also, through your experience at PN, working with so many people in nutrition, you've realized that getting people results isn't enough. And you have an example in your book about a girl that got great results, and then through some type of survey, you found out that she would not recommend the program. Can you talk about that?
Oh yeah. It wasn't even a survey. It was like blasted on Facebook. But
shit.
Yeah. So this was years ago, and there was a woman who was posting all over Facebook. Someone asked, oh yeah, Precision Nutrition, I'm thinking of doing their coaching program. Would you recommend it? And so this woman was like, oh, I wouldn't actually recommend it. And her quote was like, I had a coach and I was part of this group coaching experience. And I don't know, I never really needed my coach. I did okay in the program. I never really needed the coach, but I felt like if I did, she might not have been available for me, too many clients, whatever else. So I read this and I was like, oh man, that's a bummer. I hate to hear negative feedback, but it helps me grow. So then I went and looked her up and I was like, oh, holy crap. This woman lost like 50 pounds in the program. We measure a whole bunch of stuff like resiliency and nutrition knowledge, non-physical outcomes, and everything improved. So I'm like, if we just looked at her data, this was a dream client, right? But she was out in the world saying, don't do it, So it's like either this person's crazy or I'm missing something, right? And thankfully, I've learned how to assume the second, I'm missing something and just get super curious. So I interviewed her. And it just turns out, and we interviewed many people over the years using this jobs to be done framework that we use. And it really just turned out that, most people are looking for more than weight loss in a weight loss program. People, again, through our interviews, wanted connection to a coach, to someone they trusted and valued the experience of and the guidance of. So weight loss wasn't enough. Right? She lost the weight and wasn't recommending the program. She wanted something else. And so I don't know if the lesson is you have to embed this connectedness, this element of personalization when you're giving coaching. Probably is for a lot of coaches. But for our business, it was this idea like, oh man, we are making a lot of assumptions about what people want based on our own experiences. And those assumptions may not be valid. We may deliver the thing that we assume people want, in which case we'd be breaking our own arms, patting ourselves on the back. And they may not be happy, and then that's what kicked off sort of this exploration of the jobs to be done framework, which I know you've heard of. For those listening, Clay Christensen was one of the pioneers of this from Harvard Business School. And the idea was using a very specific interview process to uncover the job, quote unquote, that people are hiring goods and services to do. So it could be a pen, it could be a hammer, it could be nutrition coaching, it could be business coaching, whatever people would pay money for. There's a job they're hiring that thing to do, and it's usually not what you think it is. And so you need to figure out what that job is. And when you do, it helps you craft your product better. And importantly, it helps you craft your messaging better, your marketing.
Yeah, I was listening to, I think it was Clay on an interview yesterday. He was talking about McDonald's doing research on milkshakes. Have you heard this?
Oh, yeah. This is in the book, actually. This
amazing.
Chapter 3 or 4 of the book, where I talk about client knowledge, and how so critical it is. Yeah. The McDonald's story is a famous story where, McDonald's they saw a big opportunity in milkshake sales. And that sounds like such a weird sentence to say. Yes. I guess if you're in that business, it is. And so they did what you typically do: focus groups, let people taste milkshakes, whatever. And then they reformulated, and it didn't work. And then they did this process. So they literally had people waiting, researchers from Harvard at McDonald's, watching who was buying milkshakes and when. And then after they recorded, they noticed that like 40 or 45% of milkshake sales were happening in the morning on people's way to work. And they were like, oh, this is really interesting. Let's go interview some of those folks. And the story sounds hilarious to people who were interested in nutrition, but people were like, okay, cool. I'm not going to eat lunch till noon. I have this long commute ahead of me. I need some nourishment so that I'm not hungry at like 10 a.m. Eating like the McDonald's breakfast of scrambled eggs and hash browns or whatever, I can't do while I'm driving. So I have one free hand. I'm hungry. I need something to last me until lunch. And my commute's boring, so I need something interesting to do. So McDonald's ended up formulating a thicker milkshake. This is one of the reasons why they're so darn thick, because it's like challenging to pull it up out of that straw, which actually makes it last longer in the car, right? And it gives you something to think about while you're driving. They put chunks in it. Again, interesting factor. I also suspect it has something to do with the health halo. If you say you have a strawberry shake and there's strawberry chunks in it, it feels like real strawberries. And then they reformulated their shakes based on this deep understanding of the job people are hiring a milkshake to do. And I also write about Snickers. The entire last couple decades of Snickers marketing around it satisfies is Snickers' attempt to differentiate themselves from other candy bars by suggesting it's a meal replacement. That's what the Snickers message is, right? You're not you when you're hungry. Grab a Snickers. It's like a meal. That was the job they discovered people were using it for. So people in airports, for example, at those little kiosks grabbing a quick thing, they were grabbing Snickers, and their alternative wasn't like Milky Way. It was like a burrito or some other one-hand food that would tide them over until they got their next meal. So again, like you would never guess, but this is what people were hiring a Snickers to do. So Snickers got it. They figured it out, and then they leaned right into it. And so you have 20 years of messages around this being a meal replacement, not a candy bar.
I love it, man. So I want to be respectful of your time. Before we wrap up, I just want to give people a little more information about the book, because I feel like we haven't even touched 2/3 of it. From my perspective, it seems like what most people go after is like, I don't know, like tactical strategies that they can implement and like make a quick buck. The majority of this book to me seems like things that are going to set people up for a long, fulfilling career, something that's going to help them really align their sales personally, and then align their sales as a business by figuring out who their customers are and what the job is that those customers are looking to hire for. And then you get into some of the more tactical and strategical stuff. This thing is full of challenges. So guys, if you're interested in the book, know that you're going to have all of the exercises that John has already talked about. There are challenges throughout the entire book, which are actions that you can take. And yeah, man, I think it's really unique in that it sets people up for a very long career rather than do these 5 things and you'll make some quick money. Although you have those as well.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for me, you know, my financial situation, I don't need to sell books. This for me was, you know, when the PN transition happened, I wanted to take what I've learned over the last 30 years working in this field and put it down into a guidebook or a manual for people who want to or already are working in this field. You know, I look around, the turnover rate's atrocious. You know, people are so passionate about doing this work. And then in a year's time, 4 out of 10 of them are just gone. There's no blueprint for them. There's no way to clearly think about how to set yourself up for a long-term, successful, you know, sustainable career. And the best people are doing nowadays is just teaching entrepreneurship, right? So it's like after you get your certs, training, nutrition, then you got to go learn entrepreneurship. And I'm like, no, we need something in between. You got to figure out if entrepreneurship is even for you.
Right.
And how do we do that? That's career thinking. Business thinking is just a chapter in the career thinking book, you know? So if you like what we've talked about today, then you're going to absolutely love the book and you need to get it. If you don't, then maybe it isn't for you, you know? But you know, the notion is, you know, if I were to help you, let's say you were to come to me personally and say, I want to construct a career in this industry. What do I need to do? I broke it down into 6 steps you would need to do. And these are the categories, you know, and then I just walk through like number 1, you have to do career planning, what we talked about, you know, purpose, unique abilities, values. Number 2, you have to figure out what people want. You know, there is no success in selling a great product that no one wants, you know. So you have to figure out what they are. So I'm going to teach you that. You know, then you have to figure out how to be with people. We didn't talk a lot about that today, but that's such a huge theme in my life. I don't think coaching is any different from parenting, is any different from leadership. They're all the same skill with people. So then I wanted to build that into the book as well. Then comes the business stuff, right? Now, how do you either operate a business yourself or operate within a business, someone else's? Because both are viable, you know? And then next is reputation, you know? It's really been fascinating. You know, when I was at PN, we had a newsletter list of 1 million people that I would write messages to every Friday. Well, when I left PN, I didn't have that anymore. And it's a stark contrast. Try and spread the word about a book when you go from a mailing list of 1 million to 1,000.
Damn.
It's a different world. But what I discovered was that the reputation that I've built in the industry, which is a pretty positive one, I think, if folks asked around, led to this whole other superpower that I got to leverage, right? People trust me. Like, people are telling others in mass to buy this book. We sold 40,000 before it ever hit the shelves, because they trust the quality of my work. I have a good reputation. And then the last part is education. How do you forge an educational path? So that's what the book's about. It's all those things. And a lot of it is, as you said, worksheets, activities, scripts, you know, ways to really get clear on how you need to tackle these problems philosophically, and then what to do once you're in alignment. So, I mean, for me, this is a legacy project. You know, I wanted to authentically, without the things I hate, cliches and fetishizations, capture how to be in the world, you know, professionally. If you want to grow a career in this field, I think it's really applicable to people who don't work in the field. There's loads of lessons relevant to that. But really, my heart's with people who work in or want to work in health and fitness. I want them to do really, really well. This field's given me everything I have and a tremendous amount of joy over the last couple of decades. So this is my sort of investment back into the field. And I hope that every single person who needs this book gets to hear about it and gets to read it, because I think it can really, really be life-changing for them.
What are you afraid that people will either miss or overlook in the book?
Wow, that's really a great question. I presume they're going to attend to every word.
Yeah.
Focus, determination. And so the idea that they're going to miss anything feels so foreign to me.
They're going to carve out 3 days in the mountains and read
right.
it and do all the exercises.
No, I think the biggest one is that thing I said about skill with people, but generally applied more broadly. Mm-hmm. I probably what I didn't have enough room for is really getting philosophical with folks and expounding upon this one belief of mine, which is I really think that there are a few general principles to life, and only a few, that can be applied to every scenario. And so what I see a lot of people missing, right? They want to read a book on parenting. They want to then go read a book on coaching and then go read a book on, partnering with their spouse or leading their company. And I'm like, no, if you were to just squint your eyes and make the boundaries of all these things fuzzy, you'd see that it's the same thing, right? You have to become the kind of person skilled with people such that you show up to your children, to your team members, and to your clients in the same authentic, integral way. And I think the same is true, like strategy. It's the same, marketing versus coaching. This is another one, right? Being with people, being well and effective with people means that your marketing isn't any different than your coaching. Deep discovery of the people that you're working with. Mm-hmm. What do you want? What do you need? What are your goals? What are your challenges? Great, I'm going to help you get that. That's marketing. It's also coaching. So this is what I fear that people could miss, the interconnectedness of these ideas. The fact that the same ideas work in every scenario. They're not different. People who say they love coaching but hate marketing misunderstand the two. They don't know that there's no difference.
Yep, but not everybody listening to this, they're going to remember it. Love it, man. All right, so you have some free shit for people. What is it? Where can they find it?
I do, yeah. So what I wanted to do is put together some free stuff. Again, so important to me to get this thing out. I'd give every single person who wanted a copy of this book a free copy, but I have a bunch of partners and publishing company and stuff like that, and they're not doing this not for profit. But what I did was put together a bunch of free chapters from the book, a bunch of Q&As from the book, so tips and tricks and things I think are important that didn't flow into the narrative. And then also all the forms we talked about, like all the worksheets, all the scripts, all of its online content that I'd love to make available to everyone listening for free, basically. All that folks need to do is pop over to changemakeracademy.com, and right on the homepage, you can put your name and email address in, and we'll send you free chapters, all the worksheets, and we have them in fillable form, so you can fill them out online, or you can print them out and write them if you prefer to write with a pen, and then all the Q&As. So I just wanted to put something together so that people can get started right away, really feel the value that they'll get from the book. If they want, they can go buy the book. I mean, right now you can get it on Amazon.com for like $20. I'm like, I think it's a pretty good deal. But if you don't have the $20, you can still get value from this.
Thank you so much, man. Guys, if you are if you're interested in any of the books, any of the other books or resources or practices that John mentioned, we will make a note of those in the show notes at brutestrengthtraining.com. John, thank you so much for everything you do and for making some time for me, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate you and everyone who's listened this far. Thank you so much for spending your day or some time in your day with us. Neither of us take it for granted.
Later, man. This episode is brought to you by Working Against Gravity, or WAG. WAG does one-on-one nutrition coaching to help you lose weight, lose body fat, perform better in the gym, and also just to help you feel more comfortable and confident in your own skin. WAG also trains people to become nutrition coaches themselves and to start online nutrition businesses. So this one is special for me because I am the director of marketing and the president of WAG. My wife started the company about 5 years ago. And what I admire and respect about her and her team most is that the number one value and focus of attention at the company has always been on the coaching service itself. So even after reaching 2,000 members, when they could have focused more on marketing or selling more things, they continue to make the coaching service better and better and better. And that's why so many people get amazing results. I think we have something like close to 1,000 testimonials and transformation photos on our website that you can check out. And such a high percentage of people get amazing results on this program. And that's because the main focus point of attention on of the entire company has been on making the coaching service better. So what you get when you sign up is, first and foremost, accountability. You get a real human being, an expert on nutrition science and the art of coaching that will be with you every step of the way, holding your hand through the entire process. You get education through our members only knowledge base. You get access to a private members Facebook group. And when you sign up, you'll fill out a questionnaire. We'll get to know you. We'll then pair you with the coach that best suits your personality and your experience. And then they will create a custom nutrition plan. They will send this through our software system, Seismic, and week over week, you will communicate with your coach through a weekly check-in. You'll log what you're eating. If that's what your coach wants you to do, you will give them a summary each week. And then every single time you check in, they will give you strategies and tips for how to overcome your unique challenges or obstacles in your nutrition. I've been a client myself for many, many years, and I've tried just about every diet in the world. And I can truly, genuinely say that this thing works. This coach is someone that will be in your corner, is supportive, is really rooting for you, and has done this with hundreds or thousands of people before. So whatever your obstacles are, I can almost guarantee that if you're willing to put in the effort and really go after it, then you can get the results that you're after. So again, if you go to workingagainstgravity.com and enter the code BRUTE50, that's BRUTE 50 at checkout, you'll get $50 off of your first month of membership. Also, if you want to become a nutrition coach yourself because your life has been transformed by nutrition or a nutrition coach, and you just really want to give back and you want to join the digital workforce, then you can join our wait list right now at workingagainstgravity.com.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Your journey towards better fitness continues. Head over to brutestrengthtraining.com to connect with Michael and his guests. Access links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. That's brutestrengthtraining.com.